Christmas Day, 800 AD, a tall, bearded warrior king kneels in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Pope Leo III places a crown on his head and declares him Emperor of the Romans. The congregation erupts in cheers. For the first time in over 300 years, there's a Roman emperor in Western Europe. His name is Charles, Carolus in Latin, but history knows him as Charlemagne, Charles the Great. And over his 46-year reign, Charlemagne built an empire that stretched from the Atlantic to Eastern Europe, from the North Sea to Italy. He conquered the Saxons, defeated the Lombards, pushed back the Muslims in Spain, and united most of Western Europe under one rule for the first time since Rome fell. But here's what makes Charlemagne really special. He wasn't just a conqueror. He promoted education, preserved classical texts, standardized laws, and sparked the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning that saved Europe from complete intellectual collapse. Schools, monasteries, scriptoriums, copying books, scholars debating ideas. Charlemagne made education a priority in a world where most people couldn't read. So how does one man unite Western Europe? How do you revive learning in the Dark Ages? And what happens when your empire is built around your personal charisma and nobody after you can match it? I'm Jack, this is Blueprints of Power, and today we're exploring the empire that tried to bring Rome back. Let's go. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Blueprints of Power. I'm Jack.
I'm Lily.
And I'm Charlie.
Today we're covering the Carolingian Empire and Charlemagne, and this is a really important story for understanding how modern Europe formed.
Why Carolingian? That's a weird name.
It comes from Carolus, Charles in Latin. The Carolingian Empire is basically Charlemagne's empire, named after him and his dynasty.
And Charlemagne is considered one of the most important figures in European history. He's called the Father of Europe because he laid the foundations for both France and Germany, promoted Christianity across Europe, and revived learning after centuries of decline.
So he's a big deal?
Enormous deal. He ruled from 768 to 814, 46 years, and during that time he transformed Western Europe from a collection of warring kingdoms into a somewhat unified Christian empire.
The Carolingian Empire at its peak covered modern-day France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, Austria, northern Italy, and parts of Spain.
That's huge.
About 460,000 square miles with a population of 10 to 20 million. And for a brief moment, it looked like Rome had returned.
But, and this is important, the empire didn't last long after Charlemagne died. It fragmented within a generation. So this is a story about personal greatness, but also about the limits of building an empire around one charismatic leader.
Exactly. The Carolingian Empire shows both what one exceptional ruler can achieve and how fragile that achievement can be without institutional structures to sustain it.
So it's a cautionary tale?
It's complicated. Charlemagne achieved incredible things, but his empire depended too much on him personally.
So today we're covering how Charlemagne built his empire, what made the Carolingian Renaissance so important, and why the empire couldn't hold together after his death.
All right, let's do this. Lily, where does Charlemagne come from?
Okay, so let's set the scene. After the Western Roman Empire falls in 476, Europe enters what's traditionally called the Dark Ages, though historians now prefer early Middle Ages because Dark Ages is misleading.
Why is it misleading?
Because it wasn't all darkness and chaos, but compared to Rome, there was decline. Literacy dropped, trade decreased, cities shrank, and political unity disappeared. Europe fragmented into smaller kingdoms.
So it's decentralized?
Very decentralized. And one of the kingdoms that emerges is Francia, the Kingdom of the Franks, covering roughly modern-day France and Western Germany. By the early 700s, the Frankish kingdom is ruled by the Merovingian dynasty, but the real power is held by the mayor of the palace.
Wait, the mayor has the power?
Mayor of the palace is a title for the chief official who manages the royal household. But in practice, these mayors control the army and make the real decisions while the Merovingian kings are figureheads.
So the kings are puppets?
Basically. And in 751, one of these mayors, Pepin the Short, decides to make it official. With the Pope's blessing, Pepin deposes the last Merovingian king and becomes king of the Franks himself. This starts the Carolingian dynasty.
So Pepin just takes the throne.
With papal approval, which gives him legitimacy, and Pepin has two sons, Charlemagne and Charles. When Pepin dies in 768, the kingdom is divided between them.
Charles is Charlemagne?
Yes, and when Charlemagne dies in 771, Charles reunites the kingdom and becomes sole ruler. He's about 29 years old, tall, over 6 feet, which is unusual for the time, physically strong, charismatic, and incredibly ambitious.
So he's ready to conquer?
He immediately starts campaigning. And for the next 30 years, Charlemagne is almost constantly at war. He fights over 50 military campaigns.
50 campaigns? That's exhausting.
He's relentless, and his first major conquest is the Lombard kingdom in northern Italy. In 774, Charlemagne invades Italy, defeats the Lombards, and crowns himself king of the Lombards.
So now he controls France and northern Italy?
Yes, and he's positioning himself as a protector of the Pope and the Catholic Church. This is crucial for his legitimacy.
What else does he conquer?
His longest and most brutal campaign is against the Saxons in northern Germany. The Saxons are pagan Germanic tribes who resist Frankish and Christian expansion.
How long does this campaign last?
From 772 to 804, 32 years of on and off warfare. It's incredibly brutal. Charlemagne uses forced conversions, executions, and mass deportations to subdue the Saxons.
So he's forcing Christianity on them?
Yes. Converting or dying are essentially the options. It's one of the darker aspects of Charlemagne's rule. Thousands of Saxons are killed, and entire populations are forcibly converted or relocated.
That's harsh.
Very harsh. But from Charlemagne's perspective, he's spreading Christianity and securing his northern border. And by 804, Saxony is conquered and Christianized.
What about Spain?
In 778, Charlemagne campaigns in Spain against the Muslim Umayyad Emirate. He doesn't conquer much, just a buffer zone south of the Pyrenees called the Spanish March. But on the return, his rear guard is ambushed at Roncevaux Pass.
What happens?
His commander Roland and many Frankish knights are killed. This becomes the basis for the Song of Roland, one of the great medieval epic poems.
So a military defeat becomes a legendary story?
Exactly. Medieval Europeans love tales of heroic last stands, and Charlemagne also campaigns against the Avars, a nomadic people in modern Hungary, defeating them and seizing enormous amounts of gold and treasure.
So he's conquering in every direction?
East, south, north, everywhere. And by 800, Charlemagne controls most of Western Europe. He's the most powerful ruler since the fall of Rome.
And then comes Christmas 800?
Then comes Christmas 800. Charlemagne is in Rome visiting Pope Leo III. During Christmas Mass, the Pope places a crown on Charlemagne's head and proclaims him Emperor of the Romans.
So he becomes Roman Emperor?
In the West, yes. This is controversial because there's already a Roman emperor in Constantinople, the Byzantine Emperor. The Byzantines see this as illegitimate. But in Western Europe, Charlemagne is now emperor.
Does he want this?
Sources suggest he was surprised, or at least claimed to be, but it gives him enormous prestige and positions him as the successor to the Roman emperors.
So now he's not just a king, he's an emperor?
Exactly, and he rules for another 14 years, consolidating his empire and, crucially, promoting education and culture.
All right, quick break. If you're loving this story about Charlemagne, and honestly, the guy conquered half of Europe and got crowned emperor on Christmas, hit that follow button. Subscribe to Blueprints of Power wherever you're listening. We're telling the stories that shaped the modern world, and Charlemagne is foundational to European history. Without him, France and Germany might not exist as we know them. Share this with anyone who loves medieval history, European history, or just epic stories about ambitious leaders. Charlemagne is legendary for good reasons. And please leave us a review. Every review helps new listeners find the show. Tell us what you think. what you're learning, what topics you want us to explore. All right, back to Charlemagne. Because we're about to get into the Carolingian Renaissance and how Charlemagne saved learning in the Dark Ages. Let's go.
Okay, so Charlemagne has conquered a massive empire and been crowned emperor. How does he actually govern?
Let me break down the Carolingian recipe for power. Ingredient number 1, loyalty through personal relationships. Charlemagne's empire is held together by personal loyalty to him.
How does that work?
He grants land, fiefs, to nobles in exchange for military service and loyalty. These nobles become his vassals. It's the foundation of what later becomes feudalism.
So he's buying loyalty with land?
Essentially. And he constantly travels throughout his empire. He has multiple palaces, but his favorite is Aachen in modern Germany, visiting regions, holding courts, settling disputes, and showing himself to his subjects.
So he's hands-on?
Very hands-on. He personally knows many of his officials and nobles. And ingredient 2, the Missi Dominici, envoys of the Lord. These are teams of inspectors Charlemagne sends throughout the empire to check on local administrators.
So he's monitoring his officials?
Constantly, the Missi travel in pairs, usually a bishop and a count, investigating corruption, hearing complaints, and ensuring royal orders are followed.
So there's accountability?
Attempted accountability. It doesn't always work, but it shows Charlemagne's concern for governance.
What about laws?
Ingredient 3, capitularies. These are royal decrees covering everything: legal matters, religious issues, economic regulations, administrative procedures. Charlemagne issues hundreds of capitularies trying to standardize governance across his diverse empire.
So he's creating consistent rules?
Trying to. But enforcement is difficult in a pre-modern empire. And ingredient 4, the Carolingian Renaissance. This is what makes Charlemagne truly special.
What's the Carolingian Renaissance?
A revival of learning and culture sponsored by Charlemagne. He's deeply concerned that education has declined since Rome fell. Most people, including many clergy, are illiterate. Books are rare and often contain errors from repeated copying.
So learning is in bad shape?
Very bad shape. And Charlemagne decides to fix this. He brings scholars from across Europe to his court. Alcuin of York from England, Theodulf from Spain, Paul the Deacon from Italy.
So he's recruiting the smartest people?
The best educators and scholars he can find. And he establishes the Palace School at Aachen, where he himself, though middle-aged, learns to read Latin. He never quite masters writing, but he's genuinely interested in learning.
The emperor goes to school?
He does. And he issues capitularies ordering monasteries and cathedrals to establish schools. Every monastery should teach reading, writing, and basic theology.
So he's mandating education?
He's promoting it strongly. And ingredient 5, manuscript production. Charlemagne orders monasteries to copy classical and Christian texts. Monks in scriptoriums carefully copy books by hand.
Why is this important?
Because this is how knowledge is preserved. Without printing presses, books must be copied by hand. And the Carolingian scriptoriums develop a new, clear handwriting style called Carolingian minuscule.
What's that?
A standardized script that's easier to read than previous medieval scripts. It has lowercase and uppercase letters, word spacing, and punctuation. It's the ancestor of modern printed text.
So our alphabet comes from this?
The form of our letters, yes. When printing is invented 600 years later, printers base their typefaces on Carolingian minuscule because it's so clear.
That's a huge contribution.
Enormous. And many classical texts survive only because Carolingian monks copied them. Without the Carolingian Renaissance, works by Cicero, Tacitus, and others might have been lost forever.
So Charlemagne saved ancient knowledge?
He played a crucial role in preserving it. And ingredient 6, religious standardization. Charlemagne promotes a uniform version of Christianity across his empire.
What does that mean?
Standardized liturgy, the same prayers and rituals everywhere, correct versions of the Bible, many copies had errors. Proper education for clergy so they can teach correctly.
So he's creating consistency?
He's trying to ensure that Christianity is practiced correctly and uniformly. This strengthens both religious and political unity.
Does it work?
To some extent, the church becomes more organized and educated under Charlemagne than it had been for centuries.
What about the economy?
Ingredient 7. Economic reforms. Charlemagne standardizes currency, establishes trade fairs, and tries to regulate prices and weights. He issues a silver penny, the denier, that becomes the basis for medieval European coinage.
So he's creating economic infrastructure?
Basic economic infrastructure, yes. And ingredient 8, architecture and art. Charlemagne builds palaces, churches, and monasteries. The palace chapel at Aachen, modeled on Byzantine architecture, is a masterpiece.
Is it still standing?
Yes, it's now Aachen Cathedral and you can visit it. And Charlemagne commissions illuminated manuscripts, metalwork, and sculpture. Carolingian art blends Roman, Byzantine, and Germanic influences.
So he's creating a cultural synthesis?
Exactly. Carolingian culture becomes the foundation for later medieval European culture.
So Charlemagne's accomplishing a lot beyond conquest?
Enormous amounts. He's not just a warrior, he's a state builder and cultural patron. And for his 46-year reign, he holds everything together through personal energy, charisma, and constant attention.
But what happens after he dies?
That's the problem. Before we get into the fragmentation of the Carolingian Empire, I want to note that Charlemagne's story illustrates both the power and limits of personal leadership. He achieved incredible things, but building institutions that outlast the founder is always the challenge. If you're enjoying Blueprints of Power and our approach to understanding leadership and governance, please share this episode. These historical lessons are relevant to leadership in any era. And please leave us a review. It helps the show grow and reach more people interested in how power and institutions work. All right, time to talk about how the Carolingian Empire fell apart after Charlemagne's death. Let's get into it.
Okay, so Charlemagne dies in 814. What happens next?
His son, Louis the Pious, becomes emperor. Louis is devout and well-meaning, but he lacks his father's charisma, military skill, and political acumen.
So he's not as impressive?
Not even close. And immediately, problems emerge. Charlemagne had held the empire together through personal authority and constant attention. Louis can't do the same.
What goes wrong?
First, succession disputes. Louis has 3 sons from his first marriage and wants to divide the empire among them. But then his second wife has a son, and Louis tries to rearrange the inheritance.
So the brothers fight over who gets what?
They start fighting before Louis even dies. There are civil wars in the 830s between Louis and his sons and between the brothers themselves.
That sounds messy.
Very messy. And when Louis dies in 840, the 3 surviving brothers go to war. It's called the Carolingian Civil War.
Who wins?
Nobody really wins. In 843, they agree to the Treaty of Verdun, which divides the empire into 3 parts. Charles the Bald gets West Francia, basically France. Louis the German gets East Francia, basically Germany. And Lothair gets the Middle Kingdom, a strip from the North Sea to Italy, including the imperial title.
So the empire splits into 3?
Yes, and this division is crucial for European history because it roughly creates the foundation for France and Germany as separate countries.
So France and Germany come from this split.
The linguistic and political separation begins here, yes. And second problem, external invasions. While the Carolingians are fighting each other, Europe is attacked from multiple directions.
Who's attacking?
Vikings from Scandinavia raid and settle across northern Europe. Muslim pirates from North Africa and Spain attack the Mediterranean coast. Magyars from the east raid into Germany and Italy.
So they're under attack everywhere?
Everywhere. And the divided Carolingian kingdoms can't effectively defend against these raids. Viking raids are particularly devastating. They sail up rivers, sack monasteries and towns, and the Carolingians struggle to stop them.
So the empire's fragmenting and being raided?
Yes, and third problem, the weakness of central authority. Without Charlemagne's personal leadership, local nobles become more independent. They build castles, raise their own armies, and increasingly ignore royal authority.
So power decentralizes?
Completely. This is the development of feudalism, power based on personal relationships between lords and vassals rather than centralized government.
So the state is dissolving?
Into smaller units, yes. And by the late 800s and 900s, the Carolingian kingdoms are weak and fragmented. The Middle Kingdom, Lothair's inheritance, breaks apart. The title of emperor continues but means less and less.
When does the Carolingian dynasty end?
Officially in 888 in the Middle Kingdom and in 987 in West Francia when Hugh Capet is elected King of France, starting the Capetian dynasty. In East Francia, Germany, the Carolingian line ends in 911.
So within 150 years of Charlemagne's coronation, the dynasty is gone?
Basically, the Carolingian Empire as a unified entity lasts only one generation after Charlemagne. The dynasty limps on in fragments for another century, but the imperial unity is gone.
Why couldn't it last?
Because it was built on Charlemagne's personal leadership rather than strong institutions. Charlemagne was everywhere, knew everyone, made all key decisions. When he died, there was no system robust enough to function without him.
So personal charisma can't be institutionalized?
Not easily. You need structures, bureaucracy, and incentives that work regardless of who's in charge. Charlemagne didn't build those.
What's the legacy?
The legacy is complex. Politically, the Carolingian Empire fractured. But culturally, the Carolingian Renaissance preserved classical knowledge, established educational traditions, and created artistic styles that influenced all of medieval Europe.
So the empire failed, but the culture succeeded?
The cultural impact outlasted the political structure, yes. Modern France and Germany trace their origins to this period. The idea of a unified Christian Europe under one emperor influenced European politics for centuries. And the texts preserved by Carolingian monks became foundational to later European intellectual life.
All right, we've covered Charlemagne's rise, his accomplishments, and the fragmentation after his death. Time for lessons. What can we learn from the man who tried to rebuild Rome? Charlie, you're first.
Here's mine. Personal greatness can't substitute for institutional strength. Charlemagne achieved incredible things through personal energy, charisma, and attention. But when he died, there were no institutions strong enough to continue without him. The lesson? If you want something to outlast you, build systems and institutions, not just personal relationships. Charisma fades. Systems endure.
Build institutions, not personality cults.
Exactly.
That's perfect. Mine's about the power of education and cultural investment. Charlemagne's military conquests were impressive but temporary. His educational reforms, the schools, the manuscript copying, the Carolingian minuscule, those lasted centuries and preserved knowledge that shaped all of Western civilization. The lesson? Investing in education and culture creates legacy that outlasts political power. What you teach and preserve matters more than what you conquer.
Culture outlasts conquest.
Always.
Both excellent. Mine's about succession planning. Charlemagne's empire fell apart because his successors couldn't match him, and because dividing the empire among sons created conflict. The lesson? Succession is one of the hardest problems in any organization. If you're building something meant to last, you need a clear, stable succession mechanism. Dividing empires, companies, or organizations among heirs usually creates rivalry rather than cooperation.
Plan for succession or plan for failure?
Pretty much.
That's really important.
Charlemagne is fascinating. He almost recreated Rome.
He gave it a good try, and his cultural impact was enormous, even if his political empire didn't last.
That's the paradox. His failures might have been inevitable, but his successes were lasting.
That's actually profound.
History is full of paradoxes. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for hanging with us on Blueprints of Power.
I'm Lily.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Jack, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.